Hey guys, it's Michelle from Scrap Secrets and welcome to another crafty video. So in today's crafty video, we are going to be discussing the difference between Distress Oxides and the original's Distress inks. So, do you need both of them? I asked myself that question. I ask myself that question a lot, but I always have that flashback to when I was a kid and I used to say to my parents, but I need something. And they said, no, you don't need it, you want it. So, do you really need both Distress inks and Distress Oxides? We're going to walk through some of the similarities and also some of the differences between the two and some of the things that you can do with them, some different techniques. So let's get started. We're going to be doing some stuff on some white cardstock, some craft cardstock, and some black cardstock. Again, look, these are all scraps from my scrap organizer, so again, using them. Even these are watercolor paper, and I have managed to find a random stamp on the floor that I stamped out with my favorite things, Extreme Black Hybrid ink. If I was actually doing a project, I probably would have used my Misty and stamped it out a little bit better than this. The lighting is so terrible, sorry about that, guys. But clearly they're not like a crisp black image. I probably would have stamped it more than once. Okay, so first I'm going to show you guys real quick how I store my stuff. This is a file folder that I got at Target for 10 cents after back to school was done. So just found these coin pockets at Hobby Lobby and used my 40% off coupon, and then just cut some white cardstock down to size to fit into here, and then I have some more that I still have to swatch out. I definitely have a lot more because I do have a lot of Distress Oxides that I have not swatched out yet, and even some Distress inks that I haven't swatched out yet. So just swatch out the color on the top, write the name down there, and then stick in the blending tool so I know, or blending foam, so that I know which one goes with which. I would love if I had a blending tool for each one, but I don't. So the colors in this one are blue, purple, orange, and green, and obviously I have a lot of green. I have some more that I haven't swatched out yet. The other colors are housed over in this drawer back here in the same type of arrangement. So let's get into this. So what exactly are Distress inks versus Distress Oxides? So let me open up the containers and I'll show you. You can see. So these ones are a little bit, so this is the Distress Oxide. The Distress Oxide is going to be in the silver and the black is going to be the Distress ink. So if you look on the side, and I've labeled it, and then you can see the color difference. Here there's not too much of one. So I'm just going to put these back on, and I'm going to show you the purple, because I feel like this one, there is a much greater difference. Same color. Okay. So the Distress ink is a dye-based ink. The Distress Oxide is also a partial dye-based ink. The rest of it is a pigment, so it's a mixture. Pigment inks tend to sit on the top of the paper and dry slower. Dye inks absorb into the paper and dry much quicker. So for techniques like embossing, you can do it with both, but the Distress Oxide is a little bit easier to use because it will stay wetter longer. So if you have a large image, I would suggest stamping it in Distress Oxide versus the Distress ink if you're going to emboss. Here, let me switch these around so that the oxides are on the same side. Okay, so that's the first one. So the second thing is the type of cardstock that you use. So since the inks absorb into the paper, it's harder to see them on darker cardstock. Since the pigment / dye ink of the oxide sits more on top of the paper, it's easier to see those. So let's use, okay, so we're gonna let's start with the purples. So also, just showing you guys the difference between, this is the Distress Oxide and this is the Distress ink blending tool. So we're gonna start on this piece of, this is kind of a lighter black than the other ones, but we'll start with the Distress ink first and just try to do some ink blending on here. Now, you can't see anything on here. even without the shadows. Sorry about the shadows, guys. Trying a different angle with this video. Now you can see it is a little bit of darker. You can see like a little bit of a darker spot down here, but you can't really tell that it's purple. So let's try the Distress Oxides on here. It looks like a chalked image. So see, you can see there's the Distress ink and there's the Distress Oxide. So let's take the stamp and let's ink it up with the Distress ink first on the black paper. It looks like a tone on tone. So I'm going to wipe this off. This, by the way, is a Norwex cloth that I'm using. It's like came in a small pack. And I love it for just cleaning off my stamp. And then you can see, like, this is really creamy. This is what it looks like. So I know with the lighting, it's a little bit difficult to see. But this looks like a watermarked image, and this is almost looks like a chalk. It's drying back a little bit faded, but if this would be something, if you used your embossing powder on, you'd really be able to see that, versus that one would just look like you used clear Versamark ink underneath of it, but this would have a purple tint to it if you did the clear embossing, because the ink would come through. So you can use it on to stamp on colored cardstock, on dark cardstock. So let's also try it now on, let's move over to the craft cardstock. Let's do the exact same thing. And now I have enough ink on this from inking this up. So this one is the, oh, maybe I don't. It usually keeps a lot of ink. So this is the distressed ink. And let's do it on the white cardstock too while I'm sitting here and I've inked it up. So you can see the difference in vibrancy. So this is the white and the craft cardstock, and this is both, these are both Distress inks. All right, now let's try the Distress Oxide next to it. I feel like the Distress Oxides hold a little bit more ink than the Distress ink blending tools. For some reason, maybe just because it's creamier, it looks like there's more. So you can see these are the same color, but on craft cardstock, because that sits on top of the craft cardstock. Just like this one will sit on top of the white. I'm trying to get a decent amount of ink on there and do like a very similar blending technique. So there you go, Distress Oxide, Distress ink. So that is the ink blending on there. Now let's try the ink stamping. So let's, since I already have the oxide open first, let's just do the oxide on both the white cardstock. Not the best stamping, but again, if I was actually stamping this, I would use a clear stamp with my Misty. So here it is on craft. And here it is, hold on, let me see if I can, there we go. Here it is on white. Let's see if that's better. Sorry about that, guys. Sorry about the lighting. Again, trying the new angle out. I'm working on cleaning the craft room out, so you guys will start to see some different things. All right, so now let's try to clean this completely off, and let's try the ink, Distress ink. Here we go. So this gives a truer purple, And then this is more of like a creamy, almost like, let's see, almost like a chalk ink. So let's clean this off. So then that comes to one of my next points, is stamping. Now, there's not, I mean, I pressed pretty hard on here, and this is kind of, it definitely is not the best representation of both of these. If I was going to have to pick one to stamp with, I would stamp with the oxides. I know from my stamping abilities here, you guys probably wouldn't pick the oxides, but when you're actually using them on clear stamps, they tend to bead up a little bit, and it's harder to get a good impression with the Distress inks. If you have a misty tool, it's better, but the Distress Oxides, because they have a little bit more of that pigment in it, they actually stamp a little bit better. These were not meant to be stamping inks, so that's one of the things that you want to keep in mind, is that they probably aren't, they're not really supposed to be used for that, but you know, I do use them every once in a while to stamp, but I will pick the oxides over that. Okay, so with the blending, you will see that you get a much smoother blend with the oxide versus the ink. And it's true on basically any paper. Like, you can see more of the, like, I guess you would say the foam in there, where this one is much smoother. And if you don't start off of the paper, like, you'll notice that I cleaned the glass mat that I'm working on, because you generally want to start off the paper. So this is the Distress Oxide, so that you don't get that blending mark there. If you do happen to start on the paper and you forget about that, and you you do get a mark with the Distress Oxides, it's easier to blend that mark out than it is with the Distress inks, because the Distress inks have like more of a, I don't know, it's just, it feels like it's more intense ink, I guess is what it is. This is like, feels like a much softer, chalkier, almost as like a, you know, when you see like a dream scene somewhere, I feel like that's more of the oxide versus the Distress ink, which is a little bit harsher, and you can see the paper behind it. So if you're going for a texture, like a rougher texture, Distress ink would be good. If you're going for like a softer, dreamier, lighter texture, Distress Oxide would be really good. So that is blending. Now let's move on to some watercoloring. So again, I have the two pieces here. So I'm going to switch. We're not going to use the purple this time. We're going to use some of the orange. So when I do my paints, I just have a little water bottle here, and I just tend to pour out a teeny tiny bit, hopefully just a teeny tiny bit of water here. Then I'll clean my brush off. So I'm going to have this over to the side. But what I'm going to do is, this is the oxide, and I've labeled the paper oxide. And we're going to smush a little bit onto the work surface, and hopefully I won't drag my sweater in this, because I'm doing this upside down. So the ink is here. You can do one of two things. You can do what I do and just happen to use the just use a little cup of water or a lid of water, or you can spray these down. So I don't like to spray them because sometimes I put too much water on there. So I'd rather just dip my brush. So what I do is dip my brush in the water and then kind of just create a little creamy palette for myself. If you can see, as soon as I've gotten a little bit more color, and obviously I put a little bit too much water on this, so I'm going to try to get some more of the pigment. There, you can get like a nice dark color. And then you can do your techniques, blending and things like that. Obviously, this is not the best brush for it. This is just one of the brushes that I happen to find in my stash. So, look at that. You can see the creaminess. I'm so sorry about the shadows, guys. I'm trying. Here we go. There you go. You can see like the different colors in it, and it's creamier and a little smooth. So now I'm going to wipe this off, and we're going to now do the Distress ink. and it's a little bit more like a watercolor. It's very translucent, so you get like a lighter wash. You can get a darker color, like I just picked up a little bit more pigment, but I feel like this is not as creamy as, you know how some watercolors are a little bit creamier than others. These ones I don't feel like, the Distress inks, let me show you the Distress inks versus the Distress Oxides. Ugh, I really need to get better lighting. I'm so sorry about this, guys. Let's see. Trying to not get a shadow in here. There we go. So, honestly, from this, it doesn't look like there's that much of a difference. Let me see in person. The Distress Oxides, I actually feel like you can see, and maybe it was just my blending, you can see kind of the harsher lines. I think the ink blended a little bit better. When I watercolor, I tend not to reach for my oxides. I tend to reach more for my inks. Now, I use them right off the pads. I know that other people will do palettes of them and use re-inkers over instead of that. I just don't do that for... I don't know what the reason is. I never have. I've always just, this is the way I watercolored. I actually, this glass mat over here has squares, and I just kind of put them into squares. So, right. So now this is a bigger water bottle. I'm just trying to get a little bit of water there, which probably didn't do too good. But I just want to show you guys some dragging techniques. So if I go through, this is the Distress ink with water. Trying to wipe it up from my mat. So here's the Distress ink, and then you can kind of see already, you can see that it's kind of turning white, the Distress Oxides. I think I put a little bit too much water on this one because it's not, but it's got Distress ink. So like this one is, let me just lay these down for a second and let me clean this up. This cloth is so wonderful. I absolutely love it. I do have other ones, and clearly I've used this and it's loved, but I love my Norwex cloth. Sorry, just, so I think I put too much water on this because I squirted a little bit too much, but you normally would be able to see, like if you put, right, let's dab this off. Let's kind of dry this off, and let's put the Distress Oxide right on the paper. And let's try the same thing with the Distress ink, and we'll see the difference between the colors. You can see how they react. This is the Distress ink, that's the Distress Oxide. I'm actually going to, I think I have a little ink. Oh, do I have a mini mister around here somewhere? I thought I had a mini mister around here somewhere, maybe in here. I've moved so many things in my craft workshop that I have no idea where anything is anymore. Let me just look in my drawers real quick. If not, maybe I'll just sprinkle some water on. Oh, they're over here. See if any of these have water in them. Of course, like none of them have water in them. This has like the teeniest, tiniest bit of water. But let's see. So this one, the Distress ink, kind of wicks away. You can see it wicking. And this one is gonna have like a white tint to it, which is the oxidization? Whatever. The oxide. The oxide in it is going to react. It's going to react, and it's going to have like a little bit of white in there. Maybe orange wasn't the best color to do. So you can dry this, you can heat set it, or you can just wait for it to air dry. I don't have my heat tool set up, or else I would do that, but this will start to kind of like have a white tinge to it, which is the oxide at work. So you can see it right there. It's starting to like become white. It's not just a spot I missed, it is like tinging white. There you go. So there, and then this one just kind of wicks out. Sorry about that, guys. Sorry, this was actually pretty terrible lighting. I don't know, I may have to redo this video. Maybe I'll figure it out from a different angle or something. So hopefully this is good enough. But thank you guys for coming along. I hope you get the idea, even if the lighting wasn't the best. Hopefully you get the idea of the differences between the Distress ink and the Distress Oxide. There definitely are different properties for both of them. They're good at some of them, or one of them is better at some things and the other is better at something else. I do think that there are justifications to getting both of them. I don't know that you need the entire line in everything, but if you're big on watercoloring, do the Distress inks. If you do a lot of die cutting, because, oh, the other thing we didn't talk about is shading for die cutting. Distress inks are really good at that. They'll pull, you can kind of just go around the edges with them. Like, let me just show you guys right here. So, Distress, let me find this is the Distress ink one. So we're gonna do purple again. So you can go around the sides, the edges of things for coloring in a distress or a die cut, or giving it just that little bit of like shading around the sides. If you wanted to do, like on characters, I do that a lot. I go around the sides and I will shade things in and to just give it a little bit of depth and dimension. The Distress inks are really, really great for that. Just because they dry a little bit quicker, the pigment ink will take a little bit longer to set, and I think it also gives it a chalkier look, which I don't like on the edges of die cuts. I like the Distress ink a little bit better. So if you're doing that, I would recommend getting the Distress inks, or getting more of the Distress inks versus the Distress Oxides. Now, if you're looking to do some cool watercoloring techniques where you're looking for that oxidization, is that even a word? You guys will have to let me know. If you're looking for that kind of technique, then the Distress Oxides are great. If you're looking to do more stamping with them, I would suggest the Distress Oxides. If you're looking to do colored embossing, if you just have clear embossing powder and you want to use your inks to create an embossed color, Distress Oxides are perfect for that. They stay wet a lot longer than the Distress inks, so then that's definitely a plus for that. Like I said, stamping, if you're doing techniques on darker colored cardstock, obviously, it is much easier to use the Distress Oxides than it is to use the Distress inks. So it really depends on what you plan on doing. There's definitely a purpose for both of them. Sometimes when companies come out with things, I'm like, well, there's a product that's so similar to it, and do you really need it? I definitely think there's a need for both of these. Whether you need them or not is a question only you can answer. I did try to get most of the colors. I have most of the Distress inks, and I am working on getting the rest of the Distress Oxides. I don't have the last 12 colors that came out, but I think I have most of the other ones. So I feel it necessary to have them. I don't need to have them. I want to have them, but I think that they're really cool for different types of techniques. So while I can't answer the question for you, because everybody has to make that decision personally, I think there's definitely a function for both of them, and they are both great inks. And so I hope this video was a little bit helpful and cleared up the difference between Distress inks and Distress Oxides. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the section below or private message me. And I will see you guys again real soon for another crafty video. Bye!